so much for coming this evening. Chamber on Tap and Shaw Cable. Without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Cary Bowman with Lucky Bastard Booze Distilleries. It's not booze, it's distilleries, but Lucky Bastard Distilleries. Where is Cary? Come on up. Right over here. So, born and raised Saskatoon, you go to Victoria to university.
Yeah, came back here.
Come back here. That would have been in the 90s where everybody was graduating from high school and leaving.
Moving.
Yeah, that's what we all did. And we come back. So, you retired from Scotiabank, the private investors.
Yep.
That sounds awesome, by the way, private investors.
Yeah,
sounds incredible. Like you guys are in this
very
big little
elitist.
office. Yeah, super.
Yes.
We only deal with big deals in the private investment. Anyway. So you're working there 8 to 5, right?
Yep.
And then you start Lucky Bastard, and now are you stilling yourself, or do you have employees at this point?
I counted today because I didn't actually know, and I think we're up to 10.
10 employees.
Full-time employees.
That's crazy.
Which is really, it was just myself and my business partner to begin with. And then we slowly added, you had family members working there, but slowly building the team. And now we have like fantastic talent. Like we brought over last year a brewer who started off with Granville Island Brewing, which was a small brewery in Vancouver that grew into this massive, amazing brewery. Eventually got acquired by Molson's. So he spent the better part of the last 20-some years working there, and an absolute expert in his field of brewing. And that's how our process begins. We brew, and then we distill.
So you talked about that brewery being bought out by a bigger company, right? Is that something you guys think about ever?
I mean, anything's for sale, but that is it's not our goal at all. Our goal is to do what we do and have fun. And we make very unique, incredible products, and we've been getting some really good worldwide recognition. So we enter every one of our products. First off, even before we started selling, we had them entered into international spirits competitions, and we're placing medals on everything right from the get-go. So we'd get these phone calls from bars or restaurants in Los Angeles or New York saying, "Just heard about you guys. Who are you? And where the heck is Saskatoon?"
Yeah.
Right. And which was awesome to be able to get medals and gold medals and silver medals on products that we hadn't even yet sold. So yeah.
So you got your vodkas.
Yes.
That's how you started, just vodka?
That was our mainstay. That and we also have our Gambit Gin, which is a new Western dry style gin. So still based under that appellation of a London dry. Okay. But what we do is we pull back that juniper, bring forward some more floral citrus notes to it. So it's a very different gin. If anybody's ever tried it before, it is not like your traditional London dry, like a Bombay or Tanqueray or things like that.
So, and let me do a plug for you. So you can go to Lucky Bastard LB Distilleries on Avenue B.
Yes.
And you can do a tour almost any time, take your samplers, and it's a really cool place to visit. Like it's a Saskatoon distillery. That in itself is neat from a Saskatchewan business perspective, but you go in and it's a cool vibe. You got your barrels there, you got the shop at the front, and you can try the gin that you just talked about. And you just started doing whiskey, right? So your first batch is coming?
Well, we've been doing whiskey all along, and that's really kind of what got us into this was my family heritage is Scottish, and so grew up with Scotch whiskeys. And grew up with it, the fact that I didn't have cough syrup until I was in university, because Mom would just warm up some Scotch whiskey and add some honey to it, and you'd drink like a couple ounces of that, and you'd feel better because you were drunk, right, as a little kid, right? And so I never had cough, I still cannot take cough syrup because it grosses me out. So Scotch whiskey was that type of whiskey is really what I wanted to make. But we knew we'd go bankrupt really quickly if we didn't have anything to sell, because whiskey in this country has to barrel age for a minimum 3 years before it's actually called a whiskey. Yeah. And so we make whiskeys every single day. We distill whiskey every day. But the main thing that we do and what we sell and market is the vodka and gin. Okay. And as well as we do 5 fruit liqueurs. So work with local orchards to produce magnificent European-style liqueurs.
So you deal with local berries, local production. Mm-hmm. What kind of berries are you making this fruit liqueurs out of?
So we do, 5 liqueurs. The main liqueur that we do that we can't sell enough, or we sell a lot of, is Saskatoon berry liqueur.
Okay.
For obvious reasons, the name of the city kind of helps out with that one. We also do a Haskap liqueur. Haskap is also known as a blue honeysuckle. So the berry itself looks like a blueberry in the shape of a football.
Okay.
It's native to Saskatchewan. It's a fruit that the U of S has been really helping to develop and get orchards involved in its production of it.
Cool.
So fantastic fruit there. Then we also do a sea buckthorn and wildflower honey liqueur. And most people have no idea what a sea buckthorn is. It's a tree, it's native to Saskatchewan, and most in fact, it's native to northern climates, Canada, Northern Europe, certain parts of Asia. Farmers here in Saskatchewan have been using them in shelter belts since the 40s, but it produces a cluster of little orange berries.
Okay.
One berry, and it's considered a superfood because one of these berries has up to 15 times the amount of vitamin C of a Florida orange, more vitamin E than carrots, and very high in omega-3, 6, 7, 9 fatty acids. So extremely healthy for you.
So the booze is healthy.
Yeah, and it's amazing that, and everything carries through, and the alcohol just makes your bloodstream readily absorb those vitamins and nutrients. So
one thing that we've definitely noticed with Lucky Bastard in the city is the marketing. It's a brilliant package. You got the pinup girls. I know you have, when you're doing tasters and stuff, they dress up in the 50s gear and they just do a great job. You got a great marketing. Where did Lucky Bastard come from?
So the name itself, it's kind of a funny story, and most people may have heard a rumor. A lot of people think it was me, but it's sadly not. My business partner, Mike, who prior to us starting up a distillery was a family physician in town. He owns Broadway Medical Family Physician Group, whatever the case may be. He was doing locums in, which is basically substitute doctoring, in Wynyard, Saskatchewan in 2006. Bought a lottery ticket, 649, and won himself $14.6 million. And
you know, that's a heartwarming story when a doctor wins.
Yeah. Very, very hard to, you know.
So hard done by.
Yeah, terrible, hey? Terrible. So from that day forward, he's been known as Lucky Bastard, and that's his nickname. And hence, when you win $14.6 million, you can become a client of mine. And so we became friends over the years. And then really where the distillery began is I was flying off to Europe with my wife, and I read an article on the plane talking about, in an in-flight magazine, talking about the resurgence of micro distilleries in the US. And it kind of got me intrigued to think, I didn't even know if there was any micro distilleries here in Canada, let alone Saskatchewan. And Europe is a different sort of story. Just to give everybody an understanding of the nature of our distillery, there's about 25 real micro distilleries in Canada right now. There's about 350 in the US. In Germany alone, there's 7,000 stills like mine registered. In Austria, which can fit into a third of Germany, there's 9,000 registered. Thousands more in Italy, France, and the rest of Europe where they don't actually have to register them. So there it's very much a farm gate enterprise, and there's no commercial branded alcohols. Like for example, Grey Goose does not sell a bunch of Grey Goose vodka in France because they can just walk down the street to somebody like me who made it right there. And so what really happened though was Prohibition. Prohibition affected North America, did not affect Europe at all, and it wiped out every small producer of alcohol in this country and as well as US. So prior to Prohibition, there was somewhere between 500 and 1,000 distilleries in Canada, and in the US about 5,000. And every one of those, except for the really big guys, got leveled. Yeah.
This is like I'm being facetious. I know nothing about this, but I walked in and I saw he's got a big copper still, and it looks awesome. So I said, like, why is it copper? Like, what's going on? And he was like, well, I mean, most of the big companies are basically like an ethanol plant. And I'm like, hey, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, we don't judge.
No wonder I go blind
awesome.
on Friday nights. Ethanol. Why don't you give us a bit about the science between the still and what copper does, and why it kind of makes your alcohol unique?
Yeah, small batch distilleries, just like small batch anything, we have really controlled quality control. We'll never ever be able to make the quantity of alcohol that big industrial distillers do. And so typically they are big, in essence, big ethanol plants, and they make alcohol in giant stainless steel stills. And the reason traditional stills, so whether it's in Canada with copper pot stills, or if you go down to Kentucky in the bourbon industry, massive copper stills, or Scotland, massive copper stills, the reason you use a copper still versus a stainless steel still is copper binds with sulfur-containing molecules that are inherent in all alcohol. So it's in your wine, it's in your beer, it's what makes your wine go bad, what makes your beer go bad. But in the case of distilled spirit, we really concentrate that sulfur molecules. And how you know when you have sulfur in your alcohol is it has that harshness going down the throat. So that's the number one thing. So what big distillers do, because they're using stainless steel, which can't remove the sulfur. So what happens in the science part of it, the sulfur molecules rise up with the vapor of the alcohol, and because it still is copper, the sulfur molecules is attracted to the copper, and as a positive chemical reaction, in our case, creates copper sulfite, which sticks to the still, and then we wash it away when we rinse out the still. So we effectively remove all the sulfur, so therefore our booze has no harshness going down the throat whatsoever. But the big industrial guys, what they do in their stainless steel stills is because they can't remove that sulfur, they still have that harshness, so they add artificial smoothing agents is what we call it. And I'm not judgy at all. Like I'm glad that they add that because I don't want to taste harshness in my throat when I have anything. And so typically it's going to be glycerin, simple syrup, or rose water. And really what they're doing is just coating the back of your tongue with a sugar. So when you swallow, you don't have that harshness. And so I'm not judging them. We just come by it honestly, just the way our setup is. We don't have to add anything to our products to make it smooth. It just is that way.
No, and that, to me, that's a cool feature for a Saskatchewan, Saskatoon distillery. Local, you can go there anytime and buy a bottle, and you know that it's not having extra preservatives that don't need to be in there.
Yep.
So you got your whiskey coming up.
Yes.
And that's kind of a cool, like the science to that is cool too. You got your barrel, it's oak wood, and it's not like you just go pick a barrel, right? Like it's actually pretty legislated, no?
Yeah, it's the manufacturing of whiskey is every type of alcohol we do has what we call an appellation, or it's a governing, and it's really governed by Revenue Canada is going to govern us here, but it governs the manufacture of certain types of alcohol. So for example, our whiskeys, whiskey in Canada by law has to be made out of grain. It can't be made out of every type of grain. It has to be made out of certain types of grain, and it has to barrel age for not less than 3 years. And the whole idea of that is to, number one, to have a product that actually tastes, smells, and closely resembles what you'd consider a whiskey. In Scotland, in order to be Scotch whiskey, it has to be manufactured in Scotland, it has to be mashed, fermented, distilled, barrel aged in Scotland to be Scotch whiskey. Just like Canadian whiskey or bourbon in the US, or even tequila can only be made in Mexico. Champagne can only be made in Champagne, France. Those are appellations, sort of thing. So our whiskey, and we do traditional styles of whiskey. We do a Scotch style of whiskey, so we manufacture it with Scottish techniques, all using malted grains. Almost all of our grain comes from right here in Saskatchewan. We do import a little bit of malted barley from Scotland, where they actually burn peat moss under that malt there. So it has that smoky, peaty sort of, burnt muckluck sort of taste to it. Whiskeys I love, like if anybody likes a Lagavulin or things like that. Very heavy, smoky, peaty. So we bring those grains in from Scotland. The rest of our grains come from right here in Saskatchewan. And then, then we mash them, distill them, and then ultimately they have to go into a barrel. And the barreling process it's quite unique because you think that the barrel is just a container that's going to hold booze, and it does do that. Like it avoids it spilling all over the floor, which is great. But number one, when that barrel is actually made, they take it and they stick it over fire, and what it does is char that inside of that barrel, creates a bed of charcoal. So think of what charcoal does. If you have a Brita filter at home, that charcoal is a natural filtration mechanism. And then as well as you have the oak. So that oak is porous because it's wood. And so that alcohol through expansion, contraction, hot and cold, goes in and out of that charcoal, in and out of that oak. and naturally smooths it out, gets rid of any conjures or off flavors that we call them. And over time, that whiskey just becomes better and better. If you've ever been fortunate enough to have a 25-year-old Scotch, it goes down like water. Like it literally tastes as smooth as water does. And so the longer it sits in that barrel, the better off it'll be.
Interesting. So you got whiskey coming next year, right? 2000.
Yeah, our first release. Yeah, it'll be a 3-year-old whiskey.
You got your vodka, you got your gin, you got your fruit liqueurs. There's only 2 ryes in Canada, legitimately?
So rye is kind of one of these things that we've all been tricked by, I think. We call it the Great Rye Lie. In that, the word rye and the word whiskey in Canada are legally interchangeable names. So what that means is you can put rye in your bottle, even though you don't actually have any rye grain in your whiskey. And so most Canadian whiskeys that we come to know and call rye whiskeys are actually made out of corn. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Corn makes a beautiful whiskey, but it's not what you're thinking. You know, when you go to the bartender and you say, I'll get a rye and Coke, that's typically going to be a corn whiskey. There's really only a couple real rye whiskeys in Canada. Alberta Spirits does one, and 40 Creek in Ontario does another one. And if you ever had a real rye whiskey, it's very peppery, very warm. It's a different sort of spice. So think of eating rye bread versus whole wheat bread. Completely different taste, right? So we call it the Great Rye Lie because you're legally allowed to do that. Whereas the rest of the world, if you want to put rye in your bottle, you have to have 51% of your grains have to be rye. And so we at our distillery follow that rule. So we actually do a real traditional malted rye whiskey, and 85% of it is that rye grain.
So there's not another distillery in Saskatoon. You have a secure job with Scotia McLeod, private
client group.
Client group in that
Dave,
corner.
Dave's over here somewhere from
Dave?
Scotia McLeod.
Okay.
Yeah, you can all get his card after.
Yeah, we'll get it. Good plug, man. So you've decided, look, my distillery is what I want to do. I'm passionate about it. Like you said, when I went to the shop, you're passionate about this. Like you think it's cool, this whole process. You like the whole idea. Your partner wins the lottery. He's a doctor, really struggling to make it.
He has a tough life.
So to him, if he risks it all, he's not risking anything. He's got nothing to begin with. But you got a family. You got 2 kids, right?
Yes.
You got a wife that owns Metric Design, and she was a guest with Shauna Nelson, I believe, is here from the Sheraton Cavalier. She's also on the Saskatchewan Chamber. And she runs a similar thing to this called Shaken with a Twist, and she was a guest. So you have a wife who's an entrepreneur, you've got a stable job, now you're saying, hey, sweetie, I'm thinking this is a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how was that conversation?
You know, it was kind of funny because my wife, who just had to walk out because she had to take one kid to hockey and the other kid to gymnastics, so she had her interior design firm in our house for a number of years, and I think she was up to about 4 designers in our house. And then one day she's like, I've had enough. I'm going to set up a design center, a place where everybody can come in and get everything. So whether it be flooring, electrical, contractors, you name it, she has it there. So she's going to do that. And in the meantime, I've been researching this distillery and working with the government of Saskatchewan SLGA to write a policy to be able to deal with us. And so finally, everything's coming to fruition at the same time, and literally both of us signed our leases the same day. Yeah. And so we're having champagne and we're toasting to whether or not the Bowmans are going to go bankrupt, or because I in my day job did very well, and it was a job I was very passionate for, and I still am. And but the distillery is very different. It's a fun place to work. That's all we do is try to make amazing products. Our motto is we won't bottle it until it's overproof awesome. And because we'll never compete with the big guys. They spill more than we'll ever make. But we can make a better product, and we can make a product that you taste and it's easy, natural ingredients. There's no tricks to it. You can come into the distillery and see how everything is we'll actually show you the recipe for everything. Like, we really don't care. And so the distillery is a different business. And for the first time in my life, I was selling something that I made and was tangible. So my day job, I provided advice and counsel, but I would never see anything, right? I didn't have a tangible asset or a tangible widget that I was actually selling. I was structuring things and doing different things like that. So the passion in building something and actually take raw ingredients and make it into something was so cool. Like, and now we take this to the limit. Like today, we were doing a quinoa and malted barley whiskey. Like, and so we're calling people up and they're like, what, number one, what is quinoa? I know a little bit, but you know, and so and it's a grain that grows here.
I know a bit about quinoa because my wife, the vegetarian, forces me to eat that crap.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if it's fermented, it's good.
Yeah, so nobody makes these sort of things. Like, we add Saskatoon berries into our whiskey. We bring in cocoa and we bring in vanilla beans from Mexico, and we add certain things too, and we just do weird one-off sort of things, and I love it. Like, it's just, and we're having fun.
We've had lots of entrepreneurs here, and it's kind of a common theme in Saskatchewan, just because of the structure of the province in terms of the government has its hands in some business, right? Mm-hmm. And same with the liquor. Obviously, the liquor, you deal with the SLGA, you deal with all that stuff. You're also dealing with like Grey Goose. You're dealing with big companies, and like you said, it's kind of the common thing. Look, we can't compete with them, but we can do something different, right? Mm-hmm. So, as you're not going toe to toe with them, but you're competing in the sense that you're trying to get in the market. How has that process been with? Because you're not just selling out of your store anymore, right? You're in.
Yeah, we're in the SLGA stores. I think right now we're in about 210 or 215 bars, restaurants, off sales in the province.
Cool.
So we are getting a really good chunk of market share as far as the products that you're drinking when you actually go to a bar or restaurant. But yeah, it is a competitive industry, and these guys have way more money than we do, right? Yeah. And it's brand awareness, right? So we're a little company, and I'm always amazed when I go around and I talk to people and they're like, oh, I've never even heard of you. And like everybody I know has heard of me. Yeah. I've heard of my distillery, right? So I just assume everybody else does, right?
Exactly.
But creating a brand awareness is tough. Like, it's advertising and marketing is hugely important, and it's very tough, and it's very hard to get because you got to keep your head above the shelf of everybody else's, right? Mm-hmm. And they have, Smirnoff can make what I make for literally a couple pennies. And whereas it cost me about $10 to do a bottle. And so they can put all their money into marketing and brand awareness and things like that. But we're getting the word out. Like, we knock on every door of every restaurant and every little place, and we're advertising because we want people to come into the distillery. We want them to see how we actually do it, feel the grains, taste the grains. If you want a bottle, you want to put a label on a bottle, feel free, because we love free labor.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we want people to have that share that passion with us, to become intimately involved in our products and care about a tiny little company in Saskatoon doing something a little bit different.
So let's talk a little bit about going forward. Now, we talked about the SLGA. You're in with the SLGA, recent announcement with co-op and some privatization. Mm-hmm. How do you see that turning out, and how does that affect your business? Do you think we're going to go private?
I kind of get asked that all the time. We get reporters that call in to see what our take is on it. And where everybody kind of looks is at Alberta market. Alberta is the only province in Canada that has privatized liquor, and really what it is you have centralized distribution that the government of Alberta controls. And takes a cut of everything, and then everything is kind of sold from there to private liquor stores. And so two big provinces that have been looking at this deal are Ontario and BC, and both have done lots and lots of studies and things, and neither of them can actually find a benefit to their provinces to do it. So here's my rationale behind it. SLGA makes pretty much $300 million a year net profits. We're not talking about gross sales from liquor sales in this province, which is a very, very big number that goes into the coffers of Saskatchewan. And so in order for them to privatize liquor, it would have to be equally as attractive, and it's not. So I can't see it. I can see them doing different things like what they did with Co-op and Sobeys, where it's just a percentage point that they're being able to buy at. But I would say it's probably unlikely that they'd go that way. Either way, it really wouldn't affect us. We would get more, I guess, more distribution channel, but we'd still have the same protection, I think.
Yeah, okay.
That either way. So
300 million. It's a pretty absurd number. 300 million. Now, I don't know if you know this, but how does that rate in terms of sales in the world?
It's pretty high.
It's cold. It's cold winters.
So per capita, let's say we have a million people in Saskatchewan. There are 6 million liters of spirits sold annually in this province. So that is 6 liters, or it's actually 6.5 liters for every man, woman, child of spirits that are sold in this province. It's incredible how much we drink, right? So just to put it lightly, Ontario is the largest consumer of alcohol in the world. So the LCBO in Ontario, so I'm not saying people from like Toronto are all just mad drunks, but the LCBO is the largest consumer of alcohol in the world. And so I believe Saskatchewan's net revenue from liquor sales is a third of what Ontario's is. And so if you think of that, we have 1 million people. I don't know how many people live in Ontario, but it's a lot more than 1 million. And our net revenues are a third of what theirs are. It's crazy. So SLGA is making a ton of money, and really that money is going back into Saskatchewan. So I really don't see them relinquishing that. As a business person, if I had a company that made that kind of money, I would never let it go.